Hello, geeks of the web, and welcome to the first episode of the Genius Geeks Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts today, Sean Hussey, and joining me is my co-host, Frank Mantero. Say hello, Frank.
Hello, Frank.
Before we begin today's topic, we just want to break down a little bit about this podcast. Genius Geeks is a pop culture podcast where we'll be talking about anything and everything we find interesting. Sometimes it'll be a fun discussion, other times we'll debate with guests, and every now and again we'll be running down the news of the week. You can find us on YouTube and SoundCloud under the name Genius Geeks. But without further ado, let's get into this week's topic. Frank?
All right, so this week's topic, we're talking about the new Star Wars TV show called Star Wars Resistance. It's a new series beginning this Sunday. It's a Lucasfilm TV show that's going to be on Disney XD, and it's executive produced by Dave Filoni, whose previous credits include Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. So the plot for Star Wars Resistance is Kaz, a gifted New Republic pilot, is recruited to the Resistance by Poe Dameron and is deployed to the station Colossus on the planet Castellan. His mission is to find both supporters and enemies of the Resistance and snuff out any First Order spies. Along the way, he makes new friends at the mechanic shop and becomes close with the Aces, a group of skilled pilots who protect the base.
Right on, Frank. Yeah, so Star Wars Resistance is coming out later this week. The first episode airs, I believe, Sunday, October 7th. It's like at 10 p.m. too, which is pretty late for Disney. Not to say that this is going to be more mature, but they're obviously aiming at this at a slightly older audience, thus the later start time. As far as I know, the first episode is a two-parter that's going to be airing on Disney, as I said. And then later that night, after the first episode airs, you'll be able to find the next two episodes on the Disney Now app, or one of the apps that they use for streaming, which I think is pretty cool. So you can kind of get a head start on the series after you watch it live. But they will be airing those episodes as well. As we start, I just figured we'd go through, kind of break down a couple characters, what we're excited for, what we're not so excited for. Obviously, the main character here is Kaz, played by Christopher Sean, who doesn't have a lot of credits to his name. He's only been in Days of Our Lives, which is like the biggest credit that he has. Obviously, as Frank said, he's on a mission from Poe Dameron, and this series takes place around 6 months before The Force Awakens, which is pretty good. So Frank, what are you looking forward to most about Star Wars Resistance?
I think the thing that I'm looking forward to is the fact that Adam Driver, Oscar Isaac, and Gwendolyn Christie, names who are very prevalent in the new sequel trilogy, like, they're going to be in this TV show, which I think is a huge thing. They could have, they, as in Lucasfilms, could have just gotten some people who sounded like them, but the fact that they have these celebrities who are already established in the Star Wars universe actually voicing their characters is huge, in my opinion. Yeah. Also, Elijah Wood is going to be in the series, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, his character, we don't really know much about yet. I don't even think they named his character yet. It might be a named character, but we really don't know much about it at all. There's actually a few different aspects and characters we don't know much about quite yet, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, so originally, before I actually knew really a lot about Resistance, the TV show, when I saw that first trailer, I was kind of just like, so it's Resistance spies infiltrating the First Order and there's racing involved? But through the new trailer and also reading the synopsis, it seems like a much deeper story that I think is going to be good for the Star Wars universe and just Star Wars in general right now. But at the same time, I'm just with the trailer, and it's a very lighthearted show. That's the vibe that I'm getting a lot from it right now. It's a very lighthearted show. It doesn't really try to take itself seriously, and I'm just wondering if that's what Lucasfilms and Star Wars needs right now.
Yeah, it's definitely aimed at a younger audience. The reason that that's not worrying me as much as it is for other people is same thing happened with Star Wars Rebels and even Clone Wars to an extent, but obviously at the time when Clone Wars was airing, we were still kind of in that age where we thought it was cool, even if it was meant for little kids. But the stuff that they've been getting back from fans, that feedback, that negative feedback that they've been getting has been really strong on Resistance, stronger than it has been for Rebels and for Clone Wars. Not only for the different kind of Japanese-based anime art style that it's kind of going for, but as well with that little kid nature and kind of attitude that the show has. But of course it's from Disney. I mean, I don't know what else people are expecting. I would expect, too, that even by the end of Season 1, if not by the end of Season 2, we're definitely going to enter some darker territory. Obviously, you're not going to have things like Clone Wars and Rebels had, where it was like Jedi and Sith and the darkness of that, the loomingness of the Empire. You could still have that with the First Order, but there's no real Sith or dark side users involved other than maybe Kylo Ren, but there's definitely not any light side users that we know of right now, unless there's an appearance by maybe Ahsoka or somebody like that. But the whole basis of this show is, it's meant for little kids, which I think people aren't really thinking about. And I think there'll definitely be some dark twists along the way. That's definitely going to happen. It always happens with Filoni. He knows how to handle the shows well, and that's definitely something that we have to look at. Going down through the characters, too, you have like Kaz, who I talked about a little bit, Yeager, who is a former Rebellion pilot, old friend of Poe's, kind of the father figure of the group. Tam, who's a mechanic and a former pilot, played by Susie McGrath, who is more caring, brave, kind of that, I don't want to say mother figure, but probably the closest thing we have to it, just a really good friend. And then Niku, who is a naive genius with like this huge heart, and he's played by Josh Brenner. That's kind of like the main mechanic crew, which I think is really cool. And the definitely best part about this whole thing is probably the racing aspect. And then, as Frank mentioned, there's a lot of different kinds of pilots and colors and very speed racer-esque looking races, which I really like.
Yeah.
All of the pilots, we have about 5 pilots, not including Kaz. Kaz is going to become probably the 6th pilot by at least the end of Season 1. But going down the list of the aces who are the pilots, you got Tora Doza, who is the daughter of Captain Doza. He's the commander or the overseer of the Colossus, which is the station that they're on. She's the youngest one. Probably a love interest for Kaz as well. Hype Faison, who's played by Donald Faison, which was really cool. He got the character named after him. Very cocky, but still very golden heart kind of thing, which I really like. Griff Halloran, who we're definitely going to talk about. He's played by Steven Stanton, who's known for voicing like Obi-Wan in Rebels, as well as Admiral Raddus in Rogue One. Bunch of credits to his name. He's a former TIE pilot and kind of like the grumpy old man of the group. Freya Fenris, who is a very serious, like get the job done kind of character. Very competitive and logical, which is definitely a different area. And then Bo Keevil, who we really don't know much about at all. He's a stunt racer with a really cool ship. He's probably got the coolest ship of them all. And he's actually the same species as Plo Koon, which I really like. But listening to that, Frank, and kind of understanding who the aces are, who are you kind of looking forward to more or less from that group?
From that group, I think Yeager. Because I think just for me, kind of the old, wizened, battle-hardened vets are kind of the ones who I'm drawn most towards, whether it be somebody like Admiral Raddus or just somebody like Commander Recon, like a lot of those people. Those are the people that I really find the most dynamic. Even if they don't get a lot of screen time, you can already tell a lot about their history just from those few moments that they are on screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also for me, I'm very excited to see Poe Dameron as kind of a supporting character. Just so Poe has always been always kind of taken a bit of a background role, especially in the sequel trilogy. I mean, in Last Jedi, he definitely had a bit more substance to his character, but I feel like seeing him as a mentor is going to be a huge difference, because we've always seen him as kind of just the cocky, fly by the seat of your pants flyboy that Han Solo very much was. But to see him as a mentor and just as somebody that the younger and the next generation of the Resistance can look up to and see him kind of come into his own is going to be huge, and I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, absolutely. as you said, like he's just a really cool character. Not only Poe, but Yeager as well, which I just think he'll be very cool and very important to the story as well. We'll get into a little bit later about where he might fall in line, that being Yeager. But definitely with Poe. Poe is just an awesome character. Oscar Isaac plays him so well, and of course he'll be voicing him as well in the series. That must be great for Filoni to be able to work with these high-end actors and who've been in the movies now and be able to work and act with them, which I just love. I don't know how much of a role Poe's really going to have. Oscar Isaac comes with the movie stars, also probably very expensive to get recording for. And this story is definitely about Kaz and these characters. I would expect him to show up probably 3 or 4 times this season, which would be, I think, suffice. But he definitely looks like he's going to have a decently big role, which is nice. I'm looking forward to that. Griff Halloran really sticks out to me. This former TIE pilot who is looking for that one last battle. Uses his TIE fighter gear and TIE fighter parts as his ship, as one of the aces. We'll also get into him as well as where he might stand, because obviously the biggest plot point of this whole series, at least for season 1, is Kaz is looking for First Order spies within this Colossus base. And I think they've teased, and it's pretty safe to say that 1 or 2, or at least a couple of the characters that we've already talked about now will probably end up being a First Order spy. We'll go into that a little bit more. But before we do that, I do want to touch on the villains that we're going to have in this series. Because as Frank alluded to earlier, Gwendolyn Christie is back voicing Captain Phasma. Hopefully she'll be able to do a little bit more than she did in both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Anyone who's read her book or has followed her comic knows that she's a very fleshed out character, just not so much in the movies, so I'm hoping we get to see a little bit more of that. We also have Major Von Reg, who is a red TIE fighter pilot, which is super cool. He's been all over the trailers. We don't know too much about him yet, but he's definitely intriguing, as well as an unnamed Golden Stormtrooper who we keep seeing in all the trailers. No clue who that is. Golden Stormtrooper armor's kind of odd. People originally thought that maybe it was Phasma and some different lighting, but we can definitely see based on the newest trailer, that newest sneak peek, that this guy is all gold and kind of different compared to most of the Stormtroopers, not only from his aesthetic, but just from personality and that kind of things. So Frank, looking at the villains a little bit, what kind of things are you not looking forward to with these?
Well, I mean, like you said, the first thing that I'm looking forward to is definitely seeing a bit more of Phasma, because they hyped her so much for The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and she was honestly a bit of a letdown at the end. So, I mean, like you said, with her book and with her comics, she's been very fleshed out, her character. So I'm very excited to see a lot more of her in Resistance. Maybe see her as somebody along the lines of how Grievous was in the Clone Wars. Seeing her actually in action instead of just seeing her kind of directing stormtroopers, telling them what to do, getting thrown in a garbage chute. Another thing I did put down, that there was that red TIE fighter pilot. He looks really interesting, and we do see his TIE fighter show up a few times in the trailer, and that's unlike anything we've ever seen before. It looks like a mix of it looks like a very advanced TIE interceptor.
Yeah, it's almost like a TIE Advanced but red, but the TIE Advanced from the Empire era, not the First Order era, which is cool.
Right. And then this gold stormtrooper, I have no idea what to expect from that actually really intrigues me.
Yeah, definitely.
And then a few things that I'm not looking forward to with the villains is that I hope that they really don't go along the lines of with what they did with Phasma in the movies. Now, I'm 90% sure that's not what's going to happen, but from the way that they kind of treated Phasma and a few of those other kind of supporting villains that we don't really see a lot of, what they did with Darth Maul back in the Phantom Menace, just at the moment, I was very unsure of how they were going to be, but like what we saw with Maul, he became this very prevalent character in both the Clone Wars and in Rebels. So it's something that's kind of piquing my interest, but at the same time, I do have my reservations about how they're going to treat Phasma.
Yeah, I definitely think that Phasma will probably get put on the back burner, similar to Poe, just because of, again, Gwendolyn Christie's voicing her. Cost of that is probably very high. I would only expect to see her probably more than Poe, but I would say like 5 or 6 times throughout the season, which is not a lot. But hopefully we get to see a little bit more of her. That would be really cool. We obviously know the least about the villains right now. Major Von Reg is still very mysterious, very hidden, and we really don't know anything about that Golden Stormtrooper at all. I did want to go into a little bit because they've teased it slightly throughout the trailers, but we haven't seen too much of it. Not only have we now seen General Leia Organa, which is really cool, not voiced by Carrie Fisher, unfortunately, but they did the best that they could, and I thought she sounded really great. Obviously, it's hard to pick up a role like that after the death of the actress. But we do see a lot of the New Republic in this trailer and in the beginning of the show, at least. Kaz is a former New Republic pilot. We know at the time of at least The Force Awakens, and now this takes place 6 months before, so we know that this has been happening for a while now. The New Republic doesn't necessarily like to associate themselves with the Resistance, which is why you'll find that like Poe Dameron and the other Resistance pilots use older versions of the X-Wing than what the New Republic uses. So you actually, for a second in one of the trailers, see the newer version of the X-Wing that's used by the New Republic. I believe Kaz is flying one, which is really cool. I'm hoping that we'll get to see a little bit more of the New Republic, at least at the beginning. Obviously, once things start gearing towards the Resistance, we're going to see less and less of that. But it would be nice to see a little bit of New Republic come through and learn a little bit more, because we really do not know much about it at all. Bloodline, the book about Leia by I forgot who wrote that one, but I think it was Claudia Gray. That book was really good in kind of reflecting some of the New Republic. In other ways, not so much. But visually, we still haven't seen a lot of the New Republic, so this is a good opportunity for that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've got a question.
Absolutely.
So, comparing it to other Star Wars animated shows, like not the shows themselves, because obviously the show hasn't even started. Resistance hasn't even started. Mm-hmm. But comparing it to the beginning and initial thoughts for Clone Wars and the initial thoughts for Rebels, what do we think? What's the vibe that we're getting? Because with Clone Wars, we definitely knew that it was going to be a lot more battle situations. Mm-hmm. And it was definitely going to be a darker turn. Even for a cartoon, it was very dark, and we see that progress throughout the series. And then with Rebels, I have always been very apprehensive of Rebels. I watched the first 2.5 seasons, and then it kind of just turned me off. So, I mean, I do have my reservations after the somewhat bad taste Rebels left in my mouth. Mm. But, I mean, I don't know how it's going to hold up to the other ones. Like you said, like, it does seem more for a younger audience. And I mean, I'm completely understanding of that, but at the same time, people like you and I have been so spoiled by the Clone Wars and, in my opinion, the earlier seasons of Rebels, that, I mean, I do have some reservations about this show.
No, yeah, absolutely. I see what you're saying. I feel like I'm more comfortable with the look of this show than I was with Rebels. I think Rebels was very off-putting for me, especially going into it, because I watched it. I was like, this is okay. Don't really love it. I'm definitely more of a prequel era guy. I think you kind of are too.
Absolutely.
So we really enjoy that content more. Rebels was a good bridge between the two, but obviously this takes place much later. The lack of Jedi in this is definitely off-putting to me, especially because I just like that era better of the prequels. There's a lot of Jedi running around. I love the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogies is doing a decent job so far. I'm not one of the people who really dislikes the sequel trilogy. but the absence of Jedi, and in exchange also Sith during this time, because Kylo Ren and Snoke both weren't labeled as Sith. To see the absence of those groups is very prevalent. It's definitely different. Rebels still had a lot of that Force stuff going on. And I think that's what always drew me more to that era, is I really like the Force, and it does a great job of explaining it. It doesn't look like the Force is going to be prevalent much, if at all, in this new series, which makes me a little apprehensive, but I'm not apprehensive about this show because of like the art style or because it's aimed at kids, which I do like, because Rebels definitely turned me off because of not only the slightly different art style, this one's very different, but the slightly different art style and the fact that it seemed more kid-based. I trust in Filoni now. I trust in him, especially since if you go back, like I haven't seen all of Rebels, but if you go back and watch like the best arcs of Rebels that I have seen, there's some really dark stuff there, especially the stuff on Malachor in the end of season 2 is probably some of the best Star Wars animation we've gotten, even in Clone Wars. So I have faith in Filoni, as should everyone at this point. The man should
Absolutely.
really be.
I mean, if you don't have faith in Filoni and you're a Star Wars fan, you have no right to be a Star Wars fan, because Filoni has always delivered.
No, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you can't go wrong with Filoni, whether it be Clone Wars, which is arguably the best animated series of all time. And I say that with 100% confidence. And I mean, even Rebels, like we both said, like there are certain aspects of Rebels that was really good and really enjoyable. So he did get things right with Rebels, and then just Clone Wars was just home run after home run of a season.
No, yeah, definitely. But going back to your original point, like I'm not worried about the show for that reason. I'm a little worried that I'm not gonna like it because I'm just not as into like the Resistance and the pilots and that kind of scene in Star Wars. I think there's definitely some really cool things in there, some really cool storylines. This whole racer thing I think is really interesting, but it's gonna have to do something pretty good to kind of hook me in, which is a perfect segue into talking about who we think might be the traitor or traitors, because obviously the show and the producers and everyone involved has touched on Kaz is looking and snuffing out any First Order spies. It is clear that the First Order is prevalent on this base, not only just from trailers, but I'm sure they're going to make it clear in the first couple episodes as well. Going down the list of characters again, I don't know how familiar you are with them. I'm sure you've done your research, but you've got Jaeger, Tam, Niku, Tora Doza, Hype Phazon, Griff, Freya, and Bo Keevil are like the main characters. There's a couple other ones that I didn't add in there, but they're more like third characters than secondary characters, and they're probably not going to be traitors. There is another one that's not on this list that I will touch on in a bit, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
This is difficult.
Take a shot in the dark.
Who'd you say the ex-TIE fighter pilot was again?
That's Griff Halloran.
I mean, like this is all suspicion, but I mean, I'm putting cautious money on him.
Okay.
Because, I mean, you can never really trust an TIE fighter pilot or anything like that. So, I mean, they're always going to have some form of tendencies to slip back into old habits. Like, I mean, we saw that in Clone Wars at times. So, I mean, I say very with extreme caution that it might be him.
Okay. So you fell into the trap, which I love. So I think that you're probably right. If I had to like put money on who I think Disney will make the traitor, he's like the one that they want you to think is the traitor. He's not going to be the traitor though. He's going to be the one that they think that they're going to want you to think, because he's the former TIE pilot and he keeps to himself. He doesn't always hang out with the other ace pilots and stuff. He's definitely the one they like want you to think is the traitor. And if they really want to go like super cliche and they want, because it's a younger audience, they want the kids to be able to figure it out too, then yeah, he could very easily be the traitor. Knowing Filoni, even though he's not directly in charge of this one anymore, like he's not in there all the time, based on cast interviews and things, Filoni is not like in the recording booth as much as he used to be. He's not like in there like he used to be. Makes me think that maybe they're swinging a little bit more Disney's way, and it could be Griff. I think that out of this group, Freya or Bo are probably the best bets. And just because I think Freya, they've teased this, like there's not a lot of detail on this, but apparently there's a character in Solo, a Star Wars story, who has the same last name as Freya, looks a lot like her, and is probably like her mother or grandmother, and was a bounty hunter. Not sure if they're gonna like put that in, but I don't think that's a coincidence. So they could do something like that, where like she comes from bounty hunters, so there's like a reason to not trust her there. Bo is also just a really mysterious character. Like he doesn't have a voice actor. Like we don't know who's voicing him. He might be a mute character, which is like really interesting. But if I am going to pick somebody, and this person's not on the list, so that's why I'm not expecting you to pick this. I think it's going to be Captain Doza, who is the basically commander and captain of the Colossus. He is the father of Tora Doza, who is one of the pilot aces and probably the love interest of Kaz. We don't know if she's a love interest yet, but it seems like they're heading down that road. I feel like that's the one that they're going to do because he's in charge of the station. He wants to keep it running. It would be a big hit to the characters because Tora and Kaz probably like him a lot. So do the aces. Like he hires the aces to, rid the station of pirates and First Order people. So it's probably going to be him. Jaeger's another really good option that people have been throwing around.
I was thinking Jaeger.
Yeah.
Because he does seem kind of like one of the leaders, like I said, that battle-hardened elderly guy. So he might be the kind of guy that knows when the tide is turning and knows that he wants to be on the winning side of history.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think he could be a good one. If it was up to me, I'd probably say it's him or Captain Doza.
Okay.
But if they really wanted to go for a twist, this is like tinfoil hat, and I did not come up with this. I think this first appeared on Star Wars Explained, but like if they made Tora the traitor, just because she's like this giddy, like love interest, friendly person.
Yeah.
I don't think they're gonna do that. It seems a little dark, even for Disney. So I don't think they're gonna do that. But I do see Captain Doza, her father, being the traitor.
Okay.
Almost like a Lando Calrissian situation where it's like, oh, they got here first, kind of thing. Definitely, Griff is like an okay choice. Wouldn't be my first pick. Don't think it's hype. He seems like a pretty good guy. Freya, I still don't think is probably not the option, but I still think there's something up with her. Niku and Tam didn't even come up in the conversation because honestly, they're not going to be the traitors.
Let's
I don't
be
think
honest.
there'll be more than one.
Like, in all honesty, like, in these kinds of shows, it's usually the human characters that turn out to be the traitors. So, I mean, somebody like Niku, like, I don't see them being the traitor. Also, mainly because in a situation like this, I feel like the aliens are kind of gonna want to do anything possible to kind of fit in and be accepted. So like you said, I don't see it being Niku.
Yeah, no. Still don't think it's Tam either. It could be Tam. I don't know. I feel like it'll be one of the aces. That just seems the most fitting. Other than that, I mean, we don't know too much else about the show. That is pretty, It's pretty much it. I'd like to pursue this in the future, maybe like a mid-season or a finale review. We're not going to do this weekly. There's a lot of other stuff that we want to talk about. But overall, is there anything else that you wanted to kind of bring up about the show? We covered a lot of it. The art style we didn't really touch, but I don't think either of us really has a big issue with the art style, unless you do.
I really don't. But, my question to kind of put a bow on this is this what Star Wars needs right now? Do they need something lighthearted and something that is already causing a bit of quote unquote controversy with the fans? Because Last Jedi was very controversial, and Solo was even more, if not controversial, than Last Jedi.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't say that, but all right. Keep going.
But, and both of those, I feel like they were very funny movies. Like, neither of those movies kind of took themselves seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And from the look of it, this Resistance kind of looks like it's going down that same road. And like I said, we've been so spoiled with things like Rebels and Clone Wars, which have both always been very serious and very deep shows. Mm-hmm. And now Lucasfilms is kind of taking this left turn. And I'm just wondering if they did so well with the deeper stuff and the darker aspect of Star Wars. And like you said, that's also when we had the Jedi and the Sith. But at the same time, I feel like the Rebels and the Resistance are an even darker and grittier side, because that's a very gray area. So, do you think a lighthearted anime-esque TV show is what is needed in Star Wars right now? Until obviously we get the Favreau show.
Right. Do I think it's what it needs? No. Do I think it's hurting it more? No. I think people have a lot of issues with The Last Jedi, and the issues that people have with Solo are really like, one, just their release date, and two, it's just people who didn't like Solo or just people that didn't like The Last Jedi, and that's because they wanted to hate Solo. Like, literally anyone that I talked to thought Solo was okay, if not good. I thought it was really good, personally, but that's a whole different talk. Solo. Yeah, so I don't think that Solo really created that much controversy. I think it was just backlash more so from the Last Jedi or the Last Jedi haters. And even then, I think this is also, a lot of this backlash is just from the Last Jedi haters. We're not going to get into The Last Jedi, though, because that's a whole different conversation. But I don't think that there's anything that Star Wars specifically needs right now to course correct or save it. And I don't think that Lucasfilm is going down this weird path of jokes and humor all the time. I think that Resistance has been in the pipeline probably since The Force Awakens, if not before The Force Awakens. Not the earliest stages of Force Awakens, obviously, because Rebels came out first.
Right.
But I think that after there was a solid script done for The Force Awakens, Filoni was like, hey, I kind of want to play with this area. And they were like, go ahead. So this show's probably been in development for longer than we know. They're probably writing season 3 right now. That's how far ahead they are on these types of shows. But anyway, so I don't think this is a whether or not Star Wars needs this or not. I don't think it matters all that much either way. Do I think that Star Wars needs to start embracing some of that darker content? I do. I don't think this is the place for it, nor should anyone expect this to be the place for it. I'm not saying you do, I'm just saying in general. I think Favreau's show, if it really is about the Mandalorians, which is the rumor on the street right now, if that really is about the Mandalorians, then that's probably the darker content that we want.
And I feel like Favreau's definitely going to go there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think that if people are really looking for some of that darker content, go to the comics, go to the books. Darth Vader content, not only in the comics, but the books as well, is pretty dark. They do a lot of dark stuff in the books and stuff as well. If that's the kind of thing you're looking for, head that way. If you're looking for more visual content that's darker, go rewatch Clone Wars, go watch the prequels. Favreau's show's probably going to have some of it too. But in the meantime, I mean, we just have to wait. Obviously, Lucasfilm, they just signed Kathleen Kennedy to another 3 years, which, you know, I'm fine with. I don't really have an indifference. I mean, people who insult her clearly just don't understand her resume and everything that she's done. She's clearly a talented woman. I think that they need to focus down a little bit more on just overall story and how things are connecting and, you know, what content they're putting out where. And, you know, Bob Iger's come out too. He said things around the lines of like, yeah, I messed up, release dates, all that kind of stuff. That falls back on me. But I think, you know, to wrap this up, put a bow on it, you know, I think Resistance is not what we need, but it's what we're getting. And I don't think it matters either way. It's Star Wars content. For now, we're going to have a lot of great new books coming out come the new year. And then it's straight to episode 9 to wrap up the Skywalker saga. And Resistance is going to carry us there. We didn't even get to touch on how we think Resistance might evolve past not only The Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi as well. Yeah. We could save that for another conversation once we understand a little bit more how the story's going and where things are going. Definitely think it's going to go past The Last Jedi, but go ahead.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. Not by the end of season 1, but just eventually. I mean, it kind of has to. Like, you're talking, this starts 6 months before The Force Awakens. I'm going to assume by, like, the end of this season, it's going to be the end of The Force Awakens, because Starkiller Base is teased, and honestly, I think they're just going to do that. And then Force Awakens bleeds right into The Last Jedi, so you're really talking, like, by the time season 2 starts, I wouldn't be surprised if we're post The Last Jedi. But as I said, that's a conversation for another day. Any last things you wanted to say, Frank, before we wrap this up?
I mean, I did say that I do have some reservations about this show, but at the end of the day, as a Star Wars fan, I am actually really excited for this show. Like, as long as Dave Filoni is involved in it, I am 100% watching this. And I do have moderately sized hopes for this show. And just in the end, I'm actually pretty excited for it.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So we're gonna wrap it up there. Great first conversation talking about Star Wars Resistance, all that good stuff. Before we wrap things up, just want to let you guys know we don't know what next week's topic's gonna be on, but we'll tweet it out once we know. You guys can follow us on Twitter at Genius Geeks Pod. You can also find us on YouTube and SoundCloud, depending on where you're listening now. You can go find us on the other platform, at YouTube, at Genius Geeks, and at SoundCloud at Genius Geeks. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Real Sean Hussey. Links to that will be in the description. And Frank, where can the people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at F_Mantero98, and you can also find me on Instagram at Frank_Mantero Jr.
Right on. All right, guys. So thank you so much for listening to the first episode of the Genius Geeks podcast. Really appreciate this. We're going to be trying to pump these out hopefully weekly. That's kind of the goal here. Shouldn't be too hard. As I said, once we know next week's topic, we'll definitely tweet it out. Looking forward to, depending on circumstances, maybe some questions and guests and that kind of thing. Maybe even interviews down the line. But for now, that's going to do it for us. For both me and Frank. Thank you guys so much, and you guys have a good one. Peace. Peace.